I'll never forget the day Daniel stopped being himself. We were co-workers, just regular guys. Daniel was the life of the office, the kind of person who could make you laugh on your worst days. But one day something changed. Started small. He'd disappear during lunch breaks and return looking distracted, like he'd left a piece of himself behind. He smiled less, barely joked, and his eyes always seemed to be somewhere far away. "Daniel, how far? You all right?" I asked one day. He smiled faintly. "I'm fine. Just seeing someone special." I thought he'd found a girlfriend, but Connell wasn't so sure. "Guy, something is wrong with Daniel," he said one afternoon. "You see how he looks? Like someone day drain am." I laughed it off, assuming Connell was being dramatic. But then one evening, everything changed. I was walking home when I saw Daniel across the street. He was holding a woman's hand, but something about her made my stomach twist. She was beautiful in an unnatural way, her face too smooth, too perfect. Her dress flowed like it had its own life, and her movements were strange, graceful but too precise. "Daniel!" I called out. He froze, turning toward me with a panicked look. The woman didn't even flinch. She just stood there, staring at me. Her eyes, they weren't human. They were too dark, like looking into an endless void. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away, her hand slipping out of his like smoke. Daniel didn't say anything. He just followed her like a man under a spell. The next day, Daniel didn't come to work. A week later, he disappeared entirely. Connell and I decided to check on him. When we got to his apartment, the door was unlocked. Inside, the air was freezing, and it smelled like damp earth and decay. The curtains were drawn, and the only light came from a flickering bulb in the corner. Daniel was sitting on the floor in the dark, his body thin and his face hollow. "Daniel," I called, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned slowly, and his eyes, they weren't his. They were empty, like something had taken everything from him. "She's gone," he whispered. "Adesuwa left me." My chest tightened. Connell stepped forward. "Who is Adesuwa?" Daniel smiled. A cracked, broken smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She died in 1982, he said softly. "But she doesn't stay dead for long." The room suddenly felt smaller, darker. I swear I felt something move in the shadows behind us. Connell grabbed my arm, and we bolted out of there, not saying a word to each other. But it didn't end there. That night, I woke up to the sound of knocking at my door. Slow, deliberate, and heavy. 3 knocks. I froze. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer. The knocking came again, louder this time. I finally opened the door, and there was no one there. Just a small, yellowed photograph lying on the floor. It was of me, Daniel, and Connell standing outside Daniel's apartment. But it wasn't a picture I'd ever taken. It was old and faded, like it had been sitting somewhere for decades. Behind us, in the photo, stood Adesuwa. She was smiling, her dark eyes staring right at me. I slammed the door and locked it, my heart pounding. The next day, I tried calling Connell, but his line didn't go through. I went to his apartment, and his landlord told me Connell moved out in the middle of the night without saying a word. Now it's just me, and the knocks keep coming. Every night they get closer, louder. Sometimes, I wake up and swear I can hear someone breathing in the corner of my room. I don't know what Daniel brought into our lives, but I know one thing. Adesuwa isn't done, and I think she's coming for me next.